Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Blue Oval Podcast. My name is Garrett Zatlin. And yes, I do have Ben with me today, but Ben's kid is sleeping and we're doing this late. And so he is going to try to be a little bit quieter today. Ben, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well. I'm happy to be back. Yeah, this we are just trying to figure out the best time to do this. This ended up being the only time I am going to try to thread the needle of keeping you and the audience happy by doing this, and also my family. Obviously, I think you all know which one is the more important, but I won't say it.
It's me. It's me. Yeah.
And we're going to talk more about NCAA since obviously I missed that last week. I was really bummed out to be missing that reaction pod. Some really good stuff on the site from you guys about the reactions and the rankings. You guys need to go check all that out. But I'm gonna come in hot with some, maybe not some crazy reactions, because I mean it's hard to have hot takes after the final season or final championship. There's nothing left to project for the rest of the year, but a lot of interesting things to talk about. Before we do that, though, I think we are up to 137 Spotify ratings, up to from I think a week or two ago. We didn't get any Apple, but that Spotify number is starting to get pretty high, which I'm pretty excited about.
Pretty good. Here's the problem, though, with that Apple number. That Apple number was 82. We lost one somehow. I don't know how. I don't know how we did that, but we did. However, though, YouTube, for whatever reason, algorithm
Yes.
loves our YouTube page as of late. I mean, like, really loves it. So if you're not subscribed already, go subscribe, go put that out there. Yes, I know I've been late on the other podcast, but I promise you, Ben can vouch for me. If you've seen what the last week I've been doing, it's been, oh my gosh, like I can't believe it's like that meme of like that. I'm pretty sure I've said this before, but it's like that meme of like the woman who's swimming with her child in one hand, but her other child is like drowning in the other hand. That's basically me. It's like trying to like balance family and work all together at once. So I promise you that episode's gonna get up. You've probably already seen it. But Ben, before we even get into all of that, we have to talk about your hot takes, or just even just regular takes, even just in original insights from the national championships. People have been asking, by people I've been me. Let's walk through it. Tell us your initial thoughts from the national championships.
So we'll start with some high level stuff. Where start with like the team title and individual title, and then I'll bounce around just a few other observations. But starting on the men's side, team title, I think NAU ran as good of a race as they have during this entire dynasty. Like, this was a fantastic race. You had guys like Brody Hasty who stepped up all the time, but he stepped up even more than he normally does with, I think, what is it, 25th place finish. Just an absolute
That
great
matches his finish
performance.
from last year, though, I will say.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Right. I for whatever reason I thought he was like 30th last year. Okay. But yeah, just a great race. Prosser was great. Like, you go down the line, and this was just a fantastic run. Maybe you could have had Aaron Loss Harris run 5 spots higher. But like that's like the only thing that you can say about them like negatively. They ran great and they got crushed. Like, it is insane how good Oklahoma State ran. They were just, I mean, to have that many guys within the top, what is it, 15? Like, that's absolutely absurd to have Alex Mayer be 15th, be your fifth guy. Shitsama, I mean, we expected him to run better, but for him to run the best he ever has at NCAA is wild. And I mean, Musau and Kipniganich were the best versions of themselves that we could have imagined as well. Like, it was just everything came together. This was an all-time team. And the crazy part is, like, sure, they're definitely going to be losing some guys, but not that much. Like, it's Alex Mayer and everybody else. And I mean, and maybe Shitsama's gone too next year. This is a team that is loaded up for next year too. Like, that top three is going to be back, and that is super interesting to see them battle. I mean, this could be, and I think you maybe posed this question in an article of, in your instant reaction, is like Oklahoma State and NAU becoming the bigger rivalry than NAU and BYU. And I think it has the potential next year, especially, to cement Oklahoma State and NAU as the rivalry of like the 2010s and 2020s.
Yeah, I think those are all great points. The craziest part is that, like, if you like keep going down, you're like, okay, I thought Bosley and Young and Las Harris and Prosser and Hasty, if each of them run like 3 spots better or 2 to 3 to 4 spots better each, which is realistic, which is aggressive, but it's realistic, then you're looking at with displacement, you're looking at a scenario that's a little bit more interesting, right? Because then it starts like kicking down, it's a little bit more cleaner. But yeah, I agree. I think it's NAU probably ran the best that they could have. That was an incredible run. I think we're just kind of we're getting used to this dominance. We're like, five in the top 25, not good enough. I'm like, does anyone realize how dominant that used to be like viewed as? That's incredible. It's incredible stuff.
Yeah.
So I would say that, and then the other response to that is, I think there's an argument that Oklahoma State might have the rivalry edge with NAU right now, just given the split of dominance, just given the tie that they had last year. Because with all due respect to BYU wasn't nearly as dominant or as competitive with NAU during their stretch as Oklahoma State isn't now. And again, when BYU won that national title in 2019, NAU that season was still the better team. Let's just have an honest conversation. They were. Even BYU quotes are saying like, we didn't think we were, if we were going to win that year, it wasn't going to be that year. So I agree with you. Good take, and I think we're on the same page.
And so yeah, I mean NAU 71 points less than they did last year. And the men's performances at the very top of the team race are in such contrast to the women's. And this is the second year in a row where NC State comes out on top by some miracle, finishes 1 point ahead of NAU. But again, neither of these teams were coming close to running under 100, scoring under 100 points. And that's not to say that they necessarily ran poorly, but we're just not seeing like this top end finishes on the women's side the way that we are on the men's side, where you have these two teams that are just far and away better than everyone else. Like NC State and Northern Arizona only beat Oklahoma State by like 30 points compared to the huge chasm that was on the men's side, which I find that really interesting, and a trend that I'm going to keep kind of paying attention. If there's just a lot more parity on the women's side than there is on the men's when it comes to the team's perspective. All that said, though, like I don't know how NC State did this. NAU put together a solid race. What do you say, like A minus B plus? Like it was a good
B
race
plus.
for
Yeah.
B plus. Yeah, I think that's fair. Like they put themselves in contention, but they weren't as good as they've been all year by any means. And NC State, I mean, they weren't quite as good as they were at their best, but they did enough. Tanisima, so clutch. Bush, so clutch. Tui, hanging on for dear life after being sick. Incredible. And Leah Stevens, Grace Hartman coming in and just doing enough in their first NCAA experience. Like, you can't say enough. Like this, like NC State, I mean, we hear so much about the NAU culture on the men and now on the women's side. But you got to give so much credit to the culture that Coach Hennes has put in place with NC State. They just never die, they never give up, and they just figure out a way to do it, even if they're not necessarily the better team. And that I think is the biggest trademark to the culture that you can a biggest compliment you can give a culture is that they just find ways of doing it, even when they're not at their best or even when they aren't the best. And that's just an incredible thing to say about a team.
When I have two different questions. One, when you heard that Kelsey Camille was not going to be racing at the national championships, what percent chance did you give NC State to win? And then let me rephrase this question. At the beginning of the season, if I had told you that A, Chewy would be ill at the national meet, B, Kelsey Camille would not be racing at the national meet, C, three, whatever, Tanisima had not finished a race, had two DNFs prior to that, and then fourth, Sam Bush was clearly not a top four during the regular season, whatever you want to interpret that as. And then the back end was full of inexperienced runners. What percent chance would you have given that team to? So two separate questions.
I think maybe like a 15% chance going into it, just when I heard about Camille, because I think obviously they still had a chance, but like I didn't think it was great. I thought NAU was clearly the favorite. In the second scenario, I would have given him even less. I would have said like 5% because like that we hadn't seen the freshmen running as well. We hadn't seen them like putting together these performances. Like we hadn't seen Leah Stevens run so well. Like the freshmen gave me a lot more confidence. Thinking that they could at least stabilize things and give them a chance even without Camille. But I mean, if you would have told me at the beginning of the season, like I don't think I would have had them as a top 2 team. Like, I think it would they would have been a 3rd, 4th, like, range, and so it's just incredible how they were able to put it together, and I mean, who knows what Tui's future is, and obviously, they're gonna be losing a lot after this year, but I'm not willing to bet against this team, like, next
Yeah.
year, like, they
Mhm.
just their ability to refresh through the transfer portal, these freshmen, I mean, NEU should probably be the favorite next year, but I don't know if I'm gonna be able to say that. I still ride with NC State.
I don't blame you. I was thinking that same thing, but frankly, I'm too exhausted from the season to have that conversation right now. So go on, give me your third one.
Alright, let's so on the individual side, I mean, on the women's side, there's not much to say. Parker Valby was great. I mean, there was really like, Tui was the only one that could have competed with her, and she clearly wasn't at her best. But on the men's side, I I again, I think this is another question you posed in the instant reactions. I just feel bad, for, like, the lack of respect I think I gave Graham Blanks all
Mhm.
year.
Yep.
What? I mean, this is a conversation for a different podcast, but this has to be one of the most impressive like, races I think that we've seen from an individual, like, perspective on the men's side, for the last, like, 10 or so years. Like, this was we didn't have an individual favorite, but that wasn't because of the lack of quality up front. He beat Habdim Simoel, who has, I mean, has PRs that are just flat out better than most anybody in the NCAA has ever had. He beat Kai Robinson, who is coming off of 2 NCAA titles this past outdoor season and ran very well all cross country season. He beat both the NAU guys who I don't know if they were at their best, but those 2 guys are 2 of the best cross country runners of the last 2 or 3 years at least. This was a like, and Blanks, I think he even said it after the race. He didn't run the super smart race, but he was so fit and so much better. It was just in such better shape than everyone else that it didn't matter. Just an incredible testament of his fitness, not necessarily to his tactics, but just his pure fitness and like I I mean, what do you think about him going into these track seasons? Like, he has to be like, I don't know, considered favorite in anything, but it's hard not to say that he's like a favorite in the 5Ks at least.
Yeah, what scares me about him is that, like, it's not that, like, he's just aerobically dominant in the
Right.
same way that last year you look at, like, the guys like Hicks and Young
Mhm.
and Bosley, and, like, don't get me wrong, they could, run well situationally, but Blanks has proven this year that, like, tactically, he's incredible. And his ability, what I think is most important, to shift gears, make multiple moves, respond to moves, and do so at various points against varying competition, against varying individuals with varying race styles, to me is the thing that I go, oh my gosh, like what could you throw at him on the track that he couldn't respond to? Like if he's, talking about a national title win, that he wins pretty clearly.
Yep.
It's not like overly dominant, but he wins. It's not like there's a race to the finish. If he's winning that and he's saying, "Yeah, I didn't run a smart race," I'm like, "Well, wait, then what's a smart race?" I'm like, "Well, I thought that was great. I guess that's why he goes to Harvard and I did not." But these are the things where I go like, it's not that you won, and it's not necessarily who you beat, but it's how you ran these races, how he executed, and how he interprets that himself. And to me, that's what scares me because on the track, it's way more tactical and much more execution based, way more situational based than it is on the grass.
Yeah, and I think he was saying that just because he responded to every move and like just kept like using up energy and energy
But I
over and
didn't.
over again.
I think he had to.
Yeah, yeah, to a certain extent. I think like Robinson, for example, played it pretty well until he actually took the lead, and then I was like, "What are you doing?"
Yeah.
Like that was just like I think a tactical error on his part. but,
Sure.
like, just letting people go a little bit and then, like, easing your way. But, yeah, I mean, on the track, that's gonna be super useful for blanks. So, transitioning back to the women's side, I thought, and this is not a hot take, I thought Tennessee had the most impressive performance as a team.
Mhm.
But I think the second most impressive team, and this is gonna be controversial, was Florida. I thought what they put together without Amelia Mazza finishing
Mhm. Yep.
to finish 5th. I my bold take coming in was that Florida was not gonna be the best SEC team at nationals, and that almost came true, but I was thinking more of, like, they were gonna blow up a little bit without if Mazza didn't run or didn't run well, and she didn't, but it didn't matter, like, everyone else, like, I mean, the 5th score wasn't great, but Allison Wilson was so good, Elisa Thorner was solid, and then they just didn't have a horrible 5th runner, and they were able to finish 5th, which I mean, I just did not think that they could finish in the top 6 without everybody firing, at least on, like, B plus levels, and for them to have done that, incredible performance. And Tennessee, obviously, just out of nowhere, did exactly kind of what I thought Furman had the potential of doing,
Mm.
but just way better than what I even expected of them.
Yeah, the thing with Florida is that I'm conflicted. It's like, wow, they got fifth place despite that performance, a performance that I think is not even their best performance of the season.
No.
And I'm looking at that, I'll go, okay, that's that. But I contrast it with the what could have been scenario,
Yeah.
where I think of, well, I think all five of those women could have realistically been All Americans if they're firing on all cylinders. Like Thorner has been a little off the season, not bad, but she's been a little off the season. Mazadowny clearly has not been on all firing on all cylinders. Allison Wilson at times showed us that she could maybe kind of sort of possibly be an All American, which is basically what she showed us. And then for
Mhm.
Volby and Asicol to go first and sixth, which Asicol had the race of her life, which was incredible.
Yeah.
I can't help but think about be like, man, if everyone was like actually at their best, is it wild to think that they could have won the national title this year?
No. No,
I mean,
absolutely,
with
and that's
with 1-6, that I feel like they could have won the national title on a best case scenario. So, with how they ran, they got fifth. Yes, that's good, but for what could have been, that's where I'm a little conflicted.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I think coming into this season, you could have been a little disappointed with maybe this performance, but I think seeing as the ups and downs of this year for them to still finish 5th, I thought they just had such volatility coming into this that they could have slid very far down, and ultimately they were just a very stable team
Yeah.
at the national meet, which I think is testament to them. One other team I wanted to highlight on the women's side, Lipscomb. I thought we
Mhm.
both, and I was very much like, it's hard to do well in your first national meet after you've broken out. Usually you need a year to kind of learn, and then you really have that good race at the national meet. They just skipped right to year two. This was, I mean, unbelievable. Just a great pack from like 3 to 6, really, and I mean, they had a good low stick in Lydia Miller, who we thought could be an All American, and she was. I mean, they beat a Stanford didn't have their greatest day, but they beat a really good Stanford team
Yeah,
to
that was a good
finish
Stanford team.
11th. I mean, just an incredible year for them. And we'll bring them up probably in a little bit later. Um, all right, and then Arkansas women, just gonna be keeping an eye on them over the next few years because
Mhm.
I this is like we've talked about Wake Forest men, like this is a team to really keep an eye on. Arkansas women in like 2 years could could be maybe not a national favorite, but a title contender. I think in 2 years.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that, like, Mia Cochran was 96, Peyton No was 101st for Arkansas, and those are performances where I'm like, "No, they can run way better," and they only lose to Borda, and I think what's important is that, Van Camp, I've heard that she may not just be coming back at all, like, she may just be medically retired. I don't know that for a fact. I
Mhm.
heard that from one SEC source, but I don't know that for a fact. But if that is the case, if that is the case, then that frees up a scholarship. And I would, or I assume a scholarship, right? I assume that she was getting some kind of money. And if that's the case, then I assume that money is going to be allocated even better. And like there's an avenue for this team to get better and more top heavy. And yeah, so I think you're right. I think like, ninth is definitely like or I'm sorry, where would they finish? Was it
Ninth.
ninth?
Yep. Mhm.
Yeah, which is I think is also like pretty much spot on with where we had them in our rankings. And so for us to be like, hey, I think they can finish here. They actually finished there. We see avenues for them to improve with their current roster, and then we can see like recruiting avenues where they get even better and they keep returning, and now they're experienced, and then everyone else loses women. You're like, oh, maybe this team's a lot scarier than we thought.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, they're going to be because, like you said, they didn't even run like a great race. We feel like, and they still were ninth. So at a great race, they're closer to that top five, and they're going to only get better over the next few years. All right, let's go. Let's go to the men's side. Doing a quick victory lap for my Ohio State Cyclones. My goodness, you guys were
Your Iowa
magnificent.
State.
Iowa State, sorry. Yeah, yeah, Iowa State. Oh my gosh. Like this was like everything that I thought they could be, and they just did it. Like it was I mean everybody except for really Ezekiel Rock just ran so well. Sanel Masando 16th, Rogers Cablimo 37th, Gable Sapierda 43rd, Simon McCowell 55th. Like not in my wildest dream did I think they could finish 5th. I thought they could have been top 10, but like this was awesome. Like, I feel like I've been harping on them over the last few weeks, and just to see them put this together and beat North Carolina, Texas, Stanford, Syracuse, Wisconsin. I mean, it was awesome to see. This is one of the best like peaking for the national meet that I've ever seen. And they ran it just so smart. They didn't get out like crazy hard. They just kind of they settled in around 4 or 5K and just hung on. And it was a beautiful race to watch.
I hate this performance. This was dumb. Did we get we're like, well, if everything goes perfectly this season, like these guys hit, like they're gonna be a great team, and then it never happened, and it never happened, and it never happened. And I was like, well, I'm done. I'm just you guys have never given us any reason to believe in you. Sanel Masando, let me be very clear. I understand he was a JUCO star, and everyone's like, "Well, you didn't follow him in the JUCO scene." I'm like, "Well, then you didn't follow him this season because he was not good. Point blank. Period. He was not even an All American. Period. And he was 16th. He was bad. Just say it. He wasn't anywhere close to an All American. He was 104th at the Virginia Invite. He was 80th at Nuttycombe, 27th at Big 12s, and then had an okay race at Midwest. But to finish 16th at the national meet is so unbelievably impressive. I don't know if I've ever seen a performance individually that shatters expectations by such massive margins. I mean, it's night and day. It's not even close. So I mean, kudos to him because you could have just been like, well, it's a flop. Call it.
Yeah,
It's no, and he killed it. And then for everyone else, like Rogers Kiplimo, it was an All
yeah,
American. Sorry,
out of nowhere.
another one of those names where I go, nope, didn't guess that at all. Gabble Sepierda, experience, veteran, didn't really put it all together until it actually mattered. And the wildest part is that if you had told me Saeed Mikkel is going to be the team's fourth scorer, I've been like, oh, Iowa State's going to be like
Way
28th.
back. Yeah.
Yeah, they're going to be bad. Nope, they were fifth. It's the most frustrating performance because, in terms of everything that we value from an analysis standpoint, all the hours and hours and days and weeks that we spend on these rankings and analysis and trying to predict, they fundamentally ruin everything that we've learned and developed. And it's so frustrating. So, shout out to them because, again, I've always said this on the podcast with you is when a team is able to just fundamentally break down what our beliefs are and how we predict things and just don't give us a reason for how this worked out, that's usually a sign that they ran extremely well. And they did.
Absolutely. On the flip side, I felt so sure about Wisconsin being like
Mm-hmm.
a top 6 team at the very worst, and I just don't like it's not they didn't run none of their guys like on their face ran like horribly. It's just no one ran well. Like it was just I don't know what you had they had so many different guys like Rowan Ellenberg, you could have imagined him being their third guy, and he was their what their sixth. And Michael Wilson, someone like has had good moments. You could have envisioned him as their fourth guy. And I just don't know what like happened with some guys like Bob Liking. Trexler Sharp was one spot out of an All American finish, but like I think I predicted him in like 10th or 11th. Like and Spencer didn't have a horrible day, but just wasn't as impactful as we thought he might be. This was just such a strange performance because, like, there's no one out that went out there and, like, DNF'd or I mean, Ellenberg's probably the only person that came close to just, like, blowing up compared to expectations, but I I just don't know what how to, like, feel about this team because we saw them at different all these guys at different moments look so, so good throughout the regular season.
Yeah, so the thing I will say to that is Evan Bishop did record a DNF,
Yeah,
and he was a key back end scorer for this team. But granted, even on a good day for him, he's not really fundamentally changing the scores that much. Maybe a little bit, but like, okay, maybe they finished ninth or eighth instead of 10th. Like, it doesn't really
yeah,
matter that much. So that would be the only counter to that. Yeah, this is getting to a point where I'm like you guys have the pieces. Like this is a podium squad. This is a podium squad. Bob Liking has to run better on the national stage. He just does. I think he knows that. I'm sure everyone on Wisconsin knows that. Like, hey, a lot of these guys just have to run better. Point blank. Period. Um, it's a shame because I think like Adam Spencer really stepped up into like a
yeah,
key
he did his
scoring
job.
role. Yeah, like and Josh Truchon as well. Like if you had told me like, well, those guys are going to finish like in the top 80, is that where they were at? Top 80?
Yeah, I mean, Spencer was 70th, and
Yeah, and
yeah,
Trushan
Tucson
was
was 75th.
75th.
Yeah,
Like, if you had told me like, well, those guys are going to be 70 and 75th, I'd be like, oh, well, then Wisconsin's definitely going to be on the podium. In fact, they might be the third place team. Which I want to ask you this, Ben. Ben, if I had told you that neither Cree Thompson
yeah,
nor Joey Noakes would be All Americans, where would you have predicted BYU to place?
7th probably.
Yeah. hmm I think it's
I
about right.
mean,
Instead, it was
they just
James Corrigan as the All American, Kenneth Rooks as the All American, which is wild.
they just didn't have the firepower otherwise. Like, and yeah, for those 2 guys, I mean, Corrigan especially to step up like he did was massive. And I mean, and the thing is, like, those Noakes and Thompson didn't run poorly, which allowed them to still finish 3rd. But yeah, they just weren't as explosive as we hoped they could have been.
Yeah, it was a little bit of an underwhelming performance, but like also, who cares? Because they still got third, and they were the
Yeah,
clearly third best team, and it wasn't going to matter. They were always going to finish third, regardless if they ran better. So like, whatever, I
yeah.
guess. So sorry, I don't know if you have anything further.
One thing, Devin Hart, Stanford really missed him this year. He was
Yeah,
so good all year and capped it with what was it, 11th place
11th.
finish.
hmm
I mean, just you think about all the ups and downs that Stanford had throughout this year, he would have been such a stabilizing force. Robert DiDonato was awesome in the back half of the season. Lex Young started showing signs at the end of the season, 74th place as a true freshman, very solid performance. They just never had a fully like fit, it seemed, Cole Sprout, which they really needed to have him firing at all cylinders to really have a podium shot. But I just keep coming back to that Devin Hart loss. And how massive that was for them because they really just needed that one other consistent piece. And for Texas,
I
he was perfect. He was everything that they needed.
yeah, it's crazy because last year he was basically like he was the hinging piece where it's like
Right.
you have to run well to win a national title. Now obviously the team as a whole, Sprout got injured,
Yeah.
it didn't work out in general, but like he was like the volatile piece. He was the unpredictable X factor. He was a little bit of like a, oh man, we're not sure. He was kind of like a
Yep.
risky factor basically in that lineup, and now this season he was not just wildly great. He was not didn't just elevate his fitness, but he elevated his fitness and then kept there consistently where he evolved from a volatile piece to now one of the most reliable runners in with one of the most competitive schedules in the country, and he thrived on every occasion, and that's growth. That's what you do when you look back at your last year and you say, what do I need to do better? He showed up for every meet and he delivered, and that's wildly impressive, and we have to give him credit for that.
Absolutely. Yeah. Just a great way to cap off his career. I just blown away by the his improvement and being consistent. It's just a hard thing to do, and he got there. I think that's all I have. Why don't we go ahead and transition to our end of season awards? We're going to run through all our different awards, go through all our different nominees for each one of these, talk a little bit about maybe a few of them, and we'll just kind of see where this goes. So, with that said, let's start with the men's side and do best freshman award. The nominees, we have Haptem Samuel Kaleta of New Mexico, Dennis Kipnigenich of Oklahoma State, Brian Masau of Oklahoma State, Rocky Hansen of Wake Forest, Evans Kiplagat of New Mexico, Lucas Kiprop of New Mexico, James Corrigan, BYU, and Timothy Chesenden, Akron. The New Mexico, Oklahoma State obviously making up a majority of this list, which is pretty wild.
Just want to quickly put up. I always put some disclaimers on here. These athletes are only for those who are true freshmen, not redshirt freshmen. Redshirt freshmen are not eligible. Um, if someone started school classes like in I believe the winter of 2023 and then has since gone through, if this is their first collegiate cross country season that they have not redshirted, that they've not just purposefully absenteed miss, other than a mission, like James Corrigan, then they are eligible. So James Corrigan is, based on our understanding, based on our research, began classes, began school, or at least was on the roster of the winter of 2023 for the indoor track season this past year, and therefore this is his first cross country season that he's actually ever been able to compete in. So he's therefore eligible. This is a pretty one sided conversation. I think it's pretty clear that it's Kaleda, Habato Samuel Kaleda. But I do want to ask this question. Rocky Hansen
Yeah.
was, I believe, fifth at the Virginia invite, sixth at the Nuttycombe invite.
Hmm.
He's your guy. I'm just going to sign him as your guy.
Yeah,
Where
absolutely.
in this list of freshmen do you believe that he ranks? Because you got Dennis Kipnigich, who was
Hmm.
won the Cowboy Jamboree, but he was 14th at Big 12s, won the Midwest title, was fourth at Nationals. Brian Masal won the Big 12 title somewhere within the regional meet. We don't really look at that. And then was eighth at the national meet. Of course, Kaleda was dominant from start to finish. You got some All Americans in there with, I believe, Evans Kiplagat. Kiprop fell off a little bit. James Corrigan was an All American. Chessenden was an All American behind Corrigan. Where do you see Hansen within that mix?
I think he was on track to be like 1B, but I because we just didn't see it. I think I ultimately put him fourth because you just can't
Mm-hmm.
have him above guys that had like top 10 finishes at NCAAs and really showed that they could do it at that level. I believe Hansen would have shown that if he was healthy and competing at NCAAs, but I can't put him ahead of guys that actually went out and did it. And this is, I mean, looking just reading through this list, this is as stacked of a freshman like
This is
group
really good.
as we have ever seen. And this is not including some of like the top recruits that were in our rankings from last year.
Mhm.
I mean, this could get even better. Like the Youngs are not in here, the Young Twins aren't in there. Like Beerbaum isn't there. Connor Burns, like you got so many different guys. I mean, Rocky Hansen was not like the one guy like that was ranked highly in that class that we thought we would probably be talking about right now. And I mean, a lot of these guys coming internationally, we knew they had the talent, but like from like an American perspective, all those guys from that recruiting class, this could get even better. Like this could be a class that just defines the NCAA over the next few years.
Yeah, this is a like I was putting this together and I go, oh, this is interesting. And I should let everyone know that as we're talking about this, we have not actually even decided
Yeah.
um, what our votes are. Like we're recording this now. I think Mara still has to vote. Finn still has to vote. I think you still have to vote.
Yeah, I haven't voted.
I still have to vote. Yeah, so all four of us still have to vote, and so these aren't even finalized yet. So we don't even know who's going to win this, and we also we've just began to like chop down on some candidates, and it's been very very hard. So um this class though is exceptional, and you are a little frustrated because like Kaleda's clearly the best. He was
Yeah.
third at Nuttycombe, he was second at Nationals. He was dominant from start to finish. Mountain West title, GRIAC title. But you kind of look at everyone else, you're like, man, that resume isn't gonna win.
Or
It's
there's
wild.
some resumes that aren't even nominees. Like in most years, like Alex Young has an argument, like to at least being
Mhm.
a nominee, and he's not even. wasn't even really in consideration. So I mean, that just shows you the quality that we've seen enter the NCAA this year.
Yeah, no, it's pretty impressive. Let's move on to the women's side because I feel like that's a little bit more. Well,
Mhm.
it's actually not. It's not that much more open, but we'll just pretend like it is. Doris Lemagol of Alabama, Juliet Cherabet of Texas Tech, Amy Bunnage of Stanford, Judy Kosky of South Carolina, Leah Stevens, NC State, Anastasia Peters of Utah, Peyton No of Arkansas, Carrie Balaga of Colorado. I'll just get ahead of it. Doris Lemagol is clearly the best option here. It's not close. She was clearly the second best runner in the nation this year. She was second at nationals. She was second to Parker Valby at SEC. She was the only one who could kind of stick with her like through 4K in. And I'm just trying to think what other race. Destroyed, really just soundly beat the entire field at Joe
Yeah.
Piani easily, actually, should I mention. So this is not a conversation, but Ben, who would be your option for the second choice here?
Yeah, this is really tough. I think I would go Bunnage. She didn't have the greatest NCAAs, but she was so good, like, throughout the season. I and you can make an argument, I think, for Kosky or Cherubit, but I think ultimately Bunnage just showed me so much throughout the year, whether it's at Pac-12's Virginia Invite, Nuttycombe, just and 59th at NCAA's isn't horrible, like, but I think she was so much better than that throughout the regular season.
Yeah, I mean, so for me, I think it's got to be Cherubet, just because when I look at her resume, she's not it's not as competitive
Right,
as
exactly.
what you would see with Bunnage. Bunnage has faced more competition, but Cherubet hasn't faltered in any of those races that she was in. Right? She had second at Wyoming Invite, I think, only losing to Sarah Carter. I actually want to say. Let me double check that. It was to Sarah Carter. She won Gans Creek. She won Otari Barrios over Addie Engel. She was third at Big 12s, third at Mountain Region, and then 18th at the national meet. And
Yeah,
Kosky has, I think, one little bit of an off day. I want to say at SECs maybe,
yeah,
where I think she was like a little bit like 11th, which isn't terrible by any means. But I think Cherubit, for me, she's just good from start to finish. Had big regular season wins, was competitive in the postseason, had her best race on the national stage. Yes, I would like to have Bunnage as that second best option, but the thing is that Cherubit never really gave me a thing to doubt
yeah.
her fitness, and then she backed it up with a way better performance on the national stage. So
Yeah, absolutely. I think for me, just seeing Bunnage be that competitive at high level fields leads me to believe, like, on a normal day, she would have been around where Cherubit finished at NCAA's, but in the end of the day, she wasn't. Like, and so I can't make a hard argument against Cherubit. If you haven't taken a look at our transfer value rankings, we began the year very high on Lemon Goal and Bunnage, and I feel like we should be even higher about them after the years that they've had. I mean, they were so good, and I mean, I think everything we hoped they could be after looking at their times coming into the NCAA.
yeah, no, they were super impressive. And like I want to give credit to like Stevens, Peters.
Yeah,
No,
so
like
good.
if this is all based on relative to expectations, Peters is winning this award.
You're right.
Like she did not have the high school acclaim that Leah Stevens or Peyton No did, and those two of them were phenomenal. They were great, and so I just think for Peters to step up like she did for a Utah team that needed the firepower and got it with both her and Michaela Caesar, I was so impressed. I was just it just to me relative to expectations that was it. But the criteria is who was the best freshman, and I don't know if she was quite up there, but to me, she was great. And Leah Stevens, I think also, she was what 43rd of the national meet, but like it might be wild to say that like that might be her worst race of the season.
Yeah.
It might be.
No, I agree. I don't think this freshman class is quite as deep as maybe the men's side, but I mean, through like 8 7 8 women, this is a spectacular group. Like, this like front end firepower, like room to just be consistent, like for improvement for like a lot of these women over the next few years and be true low stakes and title contenders. Really interesting class. And I mean, like you said, Peyton O was just so good throughout the year. Didn't have a great NCAA's. but was such a consistent runner for an Arkansas team. And we've talked about like they really needed her to be that consistent force this year, and she stepped up in such a big way.
All right, go take us off for most improved on the men.
On the men's side, we have Sam Lawler of Syracuse, Jason Bowers of East Tennessee State. We had Ben Shearer of Arkansas, Saeed McCall of Iowa State, Chris Devaney from Loyola, Illinois, Nicholas Benston of Princeton, Roger Rivera, Texas, Sunil Misando of Iowa State, and Dylan Throop of Penn. So I mean, Sam Lawler, just starting with him, what he was able to provide for the Syracuse team. Obviously, his brother Nathan has been a great runner for them, but for him to just step up and be such a strong, like consistent force for them is a big reason why Syracuse was as good as they were and really exceeded our expectations. We just did not see this kind of jump coming from him.
Yeah, I mean he was fantastic. He was just consistent, and that was the thing. It was like consistently great performance. And if you look at each performance individually,
Mhm.
just on its own, you'd say, "Well, I don't really know if I don't really know if like that performance is a top 50 performance." But when you
Right.
string all of his performances together, you go, "Wow, this guy was like really just sneaky good." Like he was never bad. He was an All-American. He was a low stick for pretty much any team out there. And like it was really solid across the board. So I was really impressed by him. I do want to make a disclaimer. I'm not entirely sure if Jason Bowers is going to be eligible just because I don't know if that's his first cross country
Mm,
season. I can't tell if this was him from NAIA, and if it was, then we'll reevaluate that. Um, so I'll have to double check. So Jason Bowers may not be eligible, but he also might. It just depends on criteria or also just how we thought he did previously. Um, Nonetheless, though, I think I'm no. I'll just say this: I have not decided who I want to
no.
vote for yet. I think Ben Shearer, though, for me, is the one where I go like, that's pretty impressive. Like he was wildly impressive, kinda came out of nowhere. When you win pre-nats and then are still able to sustain success for the most part on the national stage, he was 42nd, but even
Mhm.
then, he was 5th at SECs, 2nd at Chili Pepper, 1 pre-nats, 42nd at nationals. Like, guy was good. He was 754 3K, 1407 5K. He doesn't have a 10K time on his resume, 4 flat miler, but, like, this guy was 155th last year at nats. He was 21st at SECs. He was 24th at pre-nats. He wasn't even in the top 5 at Chili Pepper last year. So when I take a look at that, I go, if he doesn't step up like he does, Arkansas is not on the podium.
No, absolutely, and to be frank, I didn't buy it after pre-nats. I just thought that was kind of a fluky race, and I could not have been more wrong. I mean, 42nd at nationals is, I mean, it's not blowing the doors off, but it's a very good performance and just proves that he has clearly gone up a level and is just able to run these races consistently in day out and be that true low stick for an Arkansas team that has a few other low sticks as well. He really elevated their ceiling to a level I just didn't think they had because I didn't think they had really anybody who could be at this level besides Yago and Kiprop, and he was able to bridge that gap and put Arkansas to another level.
I want to highlight Dylan Throop of Penn and why he was such a tricky name. So last fall, he had one race, 52nd, but I believe he got injured and then couldn't continue, right? But prior to that, the fall prior to that in 2021, the fall of 2021, he was 17th at Paul Short, 39th at Panorama Farms XC Challenge, 44th at the Ivy League Championships, in a DNF at the Mid Atlantic Regional Meet. Not good. And compared to that, it's like to now where he was second at Ivy Leagues, seventh at pre
Hmm.
nationals, third at Battle in Beantown, won the Lehigh Invitational. Those are significantly strong results in a clear jump, and you could argue maybe quantitatively that puts him up there for this award. The challenge though is how much do you balance between his PRs in the spring, which were 28:48 in the 10K, 13:49 in the 5K, and then also the fact that he got injured again towards the in the postseason, so he couldn't make nationals. It's a really tricky balance. It's like I don't
Yeah.
know like where we figure that out with. So I think he's worthy of a nomination, but trying to figure out it's like okay, well, what's the comparative season there for him? I don't know if we have one.
I really liked what we saw from Nicholas Benston. Him taking that jump from good runner to great runner this year, I thought was just a good no, I'm trying to think of the word like a good representation of Princeton as a whole this year. They
Mm,
went from a good solid team to a I think what was it 10th or 11th place finish
11th,
team
yeah.
this year. 11th. I mean, and that was in large part because Benston gave them that low stick that they just haven't had in years past, and I think he was such a huge force in their improvement, and I think would be someone that I'm going to be heavily considering for this award as well.
Yeah, he was great, and, shout out to Chris Devaney, Sade McKell, all those guys, Roger
Yep.
Rivera. I think Roger Rivera, in terms of what he brought to his team, was
Hmm.
massive.
Absolutely.
I'm gonna move us to the most improved on the women. Chloe Scrimgeour of Georgetown, Melissa Riggins, Georgetown, Kimberly May, Providence, Allie Upshaw, Northern Arizona, Rosina Machu of Gonzaga, Sydney Thorvaldsen of Arkansas, Phoebe Anderson of Columbia, Nicola Jansen of New Mexico, Michaeli Caesar of Utah rounds it out, and we should say some of these awards, specifically on the women's side, were brutal to like cap the candidates for. We try to have no more than nine. We say nine's the cutoff. You can't have more than nine candidates. You have to have like I believe minimum 4 or 5, max nine. And it was so tough to leave off Leanne Willimise of Wisconsin, Carmen Alder of BYU. When the winner of pre-nationals is not there. Now, granted, this is all quantity. It's almost improved. So, like, if they were second last year, it's a little bit different. But Alder was competitive, but clearly she leaped a level this year. Yes, we know how difficult it is to be like, well, why the heck is she not on there? We know it's very hard, but you should take a look at some of these results because these women made massive jumps. It was impressive.
Melissa Riggins on the face of her track PRs, it doesn't seem like she should be deserving of this award, but she was such a just a middle distance focused runner, and for her to come out this year and be a true low stick for Georgetown was so impressive for a traditionally middle distance runner. Like, I am just stunned by I was stunned by her ability to just be as impactful as she was on the grass. She didn't have, I think she DNF'd at NCAAs, but everything else was so, so impressive. And I mean, if she runs at her best, then this is a Georgetown team that finishes much, much higher, and I was just impressed so much with just the way she was able to translate her middle distance fitness to the 6K and 5K this year.
What I think is so important with her is that she makes a big jump, right? But for her, it's that, like, she's a middle distance runner who's
Mhm.
really good. Middle distance runners are not supposed to be getting 15th at Nutty Comb. They're just
Yeah.
not. That's really impressive. Like, that's wildly dynamic. Excuse me, wildly dynamic range. So for that reason, that gives her like a little bit more of an edge to be like, could she win this award? And maybe. I think there's a very good conversation to be had about Rosina Machu,
That was the
who,
next day. Yep.
and that was, I mean, she just was incredible. She starts the season off second at the Waves Invite, 4K race, whatever. Toss it aside. Then she wins Loyola Lakefront Invite over Addie Ankle, dominates the field. Same thing. Santa Clara Bronco wins that. West Coast Conference title wins that. Fourth at West Region, and then 16th at the national meet. I'm like, well, where did this come from? You look back at her outdoor track season. It was 15:59 5K. It was good. It wasn't amazing. Then 29 3K. She was 22nd in the West Region last year, 7th at West Coast Conference. And then the fall before that, she was 44th at West Regional Championship, 17th at West Coast Conference, 143rd at Nutty Calm. There just wasn't a lot of data. There was very little data on her, and what was there did not suggest that she was going to be a top 20 name in the nation. And what I just want to pat ourselves on the back a little bit, it was really hard to rank her. It was really, really
Mhm.
hard to rank her. You don't have a good idea. And we ranked her, I think, 16th or 17th going into the national meet. And she was 16th or 17th. Now, to be fair, those rankings, as I've been very clear, some people don't seem to understand this. Those rankings are aggregates. They're power rankings. They're based on how someone ran the entirety of the season. You cannot tell me that if Parker Volby had a bomb, just bombed her race and finished 200th, that she was the 200th best runner in the nation that season. That's a ridiculous take. So these rankings are aggregates, and so I should counter my own point there. But regardless, I think it was incredibly hard to gauge just how good she was, and so for her to actually show up and then deliver on the entire extent of her potential was very impressive.
She was someone who really needed a good NCAA performance, I felt like, to really validate what she had done just because
Mhm.
she hadn't run in these big fields, and so for her to do this and finish 16th was I think makes her case so compelling for this award. One other person wanted to highlight Nicola Jansen, coming over from Bradley, following, her coach, Coach Gussin from Bradley just was so solid for this team that was in such flux after the coaching change. And for her to finish as an All American in her first year in New Mexico, just a huge improvement. She was always a good runner at Bradley, but that she clearly took it up a notch this year.
Yeah, she was great. And a lot of those women, had moments, I'll say, of
Mhm.
like, oh, like this is interesting. And they had those moments at Bradley, but for then Jansen to truly step up and to truly be at a point where, she's a low stick and she's competing with Sarah Carter and she's an All American, taking down these names, I think is, wildly impressive. I think there's another also argument, and I think a realistic argument for Michaeli Caesar, who
Mhm.
this past spring was 34-12 over 10K and 16-16 over 5K. She was with Cal State Fullerton. She was like, and she was actually supposed to go to UCLA first. And then you look at her cross country resume: 48th at the West Regional Championships last year, 8th at the Big West, second at Highlander, third at Bill Dellinger. Really in any race that mattered, she was not a standout name, and she just got 26 at the national meet after getting ninth at the Pac-12 championships, 76 at Nuttycombe, which was fine, and then fifth at Griak. The way that she stepped up, and you think about like, man, what could she have been for UCLA this year when they had all those different pieces as well? Really impressive stuff for her. And I think there's an argument for her as well. I think there's an argument for like a lot of these women.
Absolutely. Let's go then to the best performance award on the men's side, and we'll try to go through these fairly quickly. But we have Graham Blanks wins Nuttycombe in the Nuttycombe Invite. Graham Blanks wins the NCAA Cross Country Championships. Chandler Gibbons upsets field to win Joe Piani Invite. Ben Shearer's breakout race gives him pre-nationals win. And then we had Drew Bosley wins the Virginia Invite. Brian Massow fends off Alex Mayer to win the Big Ten individual title, and Sanel Masando finishes 16th at the NCAA Cross Country Championships. I mean, for me, this is like choosing between your Graham Blanks races. I don't know if you feel differently.
I'm still on my Masando high. Um, I really like that performance. Am I going to vote for that? I don't know. I've not decided on this one yet. This is one of those another ones where I've like not made my decision yet. I think the Graham Blanks ones. I think there's an argument for both of them. It depends
Yeah.
on what style of race that you liked more from
Hmm.
him. They're actually pretty similar in some
Yep.
cases, maybe one more than the other. Um, so I think there's that. I also like I wanted to like give the Gibbons, win like
Yeah.
some credit. I want to give the Shearer win some credit. It, it just wasn't like I don't know what
The
it was
fields
about it.
weren't great. The fields
It's
weren't
not
loaded.
some. Yeah, I mean they weren't nearly as loaded as Nuttycombe or Nationals.
Virginia. Yeah.
Yeah. And so it's hard, but I think it's blanks. I think it depends on how you like it. And then I would personally put Sanel Masando in there because I think 16th after being 104th the Virginia Invite is unbelievable
Bonkers.
to me.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think if like the Gibbons race, like if like he had finished a little bit higher at NCAA's or Shears with the same thing,
Yep.
like I think there would be a
Mhm.
little bit more shine to those
Yep.
performances. Um, but yeah, I for me, I think I'm leaning towards those blanks, one of those blanks, just because he just really showed that he was the guy this year, and in a way that I don't think any of us really expected him to do so.
In terms of I don't want to say execution, but in terms of like impressiveness, I would maybe throw Brian Massow in there just because of
Mm,
how he broke away from teammates that we're now realizing are all top 15 All
really
Americans
good.
at the Big 12 championships, as well as the BYU men, as well as Devin Hart, as well as Iowa State. Frankly, Iowa State didn't really run that well that meet, but
Yeah.
Brian Massell breaks away. Mayer catches up to him, and then Massell breaks him again. And
Yeah.
like to me, I'm like, man, that's pretty impressive. Like that's really, really impressive. So with the way how he handled that, that was pretty good. I'm gonna move us to the women. Best Performance Award. Parker Volby wins Nuttycombe Invite. Parker Volby wins NCAA Championships. Parker Volby comfortably pulls away from Doris Lemmengold to win the SEC title. Doris Lemmengold dominates the Joe Piani field en route to a win. Carmen Aldridge breakout race at pre-nationals. Taylor Rowe outruns Bila Chepkuri to win the Big 12 individual title. Caitlin Tui wins ACC title, and Elise Stearns wins the Virginia Invite.
I mean, I love the Stearns win at Virginia Invite, but when you have 3 different performances on this list, it has to be one of these Volby runs, right? I mean, I think Nuttycombe is probably the one because that was a better Tui, I think that she beat.
That's a good point. Yeah, yeah, you know what? I think so. Here's the thing. I think I'm with you on that agreement, but I'll be curious to see if Finn and Mara
Right.
follow that same logic that we do. If like you can't tell them, you can't
I
tell
will
them.
not.
You just keep this between us, audience. Keep this between. Well, they're going to vote on it before then, but everyone, this is like a group secret between a couple, thousand. But that's not the point. We're going to keep this all together. And yeah. So I guess I'll probably go with that one as well, but I want to go with one of those breakout races because you look at what Alder did, and like in retrospect, it's like, well, where the heck did that come from?
Right.
So I don't know, but I think you're right. I think it's probably the Volby win at Nuttycombe.
And the lemon gold one was so good, but, like and just so, like, I think even builds the case for one of those Volpe performances because
And
lemon
that's the
gold was
problem.
so much better than everyone else, but then Volpe was so much better than her. So yeah, I think one of those Volpes, but a lot of really good races. Let's go to the men's best cross country coach award. We have this is a chock full of good nominees. We have Dave Smith of Oklahoma State, Mike Smith of Northern Arizona, Ed Eyestone of BYU, Chris Bucknam, Arkansas, Jeremy Sudbury of Iowa State, Greg Metcalf, Texas, Jason Vigilante, Princeton, Darren Gosson of New Mexico, and Lyle Weiss of Montana State. I think Dave Smith is like the easy answer just because obviously he put together a historic team, but I think you have compelling arguments for someone like Lyle Weiss for putting
Mm-hmm.
together such a good Montana State team after they lost so many top guys and the way they came on so strong at the end of the year. I think someone like Greg Metcalf, when this was not a deep team, but they had talent and they actually all put it together and they didn't really have off days. I think that's super impressive as well. And Jason Vigilante, I mentioned Princeton earlier, just took this team to another level this year, which I think was a very good coaching job.
Yeah, I think it comes down to Dave Smith, and I think Lyle Weiss has a legitimate argument here. I
Mhm.
really do. I mean, I think that Montana State team lost Duncan Hamilton, and they lost one other guy who I blank on his name every time. I'll have to get back to you on that one. Um, like this was not a team that was supposed to do that. I would be like, okay, maybe they could sneak into the national meet, and if they do, like, they're not going to run that well. But then they were bad at Joe Piani, and I'm like, well, that's the season. Like they're not getting in, and then they started picking up a little momentum. We were like, hey, who could get in is Montana State if they get pushed in. Sure enough, Colorado pushes them in, and we're like, okay, well, they're not going to do anything on the national stage. No, they got 13th.
Yeah.
And I don't know how that happens. That goes to show experience, like you've been saying, and you've been saying this since day one, which is it's one thing to get to the national stage after in a breakout year once and then just get the experience, but you're not expected to do well, which is what happened last year. But then Montana State got back to that national stage with similar, not perfect, but somewhat similar personnel,
Mhm.
and they were much better, dramatically better, with a team that you could argue
Is
was
worse.
maybe less talented. Yeah, you could
Yeah.
argue they might be less talented, and that's why I think Lyle Weiss might legitimately have a conversation. And he's the only reason why I haven't just written in Dave Smith yet.
Yeah. Yep. I couldn't agree more. Anything I mean, I think we covered it. You wanna go to the women's?
Let's go to the women's.
We have Lori Hennis of NC State, Dave Smith of Oklahoma State, Mike Smith of Northern Arizona, Will Palmer, Florida, Sean Carlson of Tennessee, Nick Stenoff of Alabama. Or do we have him?
Yeah, yeah, we
Yeah,
do, we do.
okay,
Yep,
all right, we did.
yep.
Okay. Kyle Kepler of Utah, Nick Polk of Lipscomb, and we have Pete Watson of Boston College rounding out our nominees.
Who do you? Okay, so I think I'll just go first on this one.
Yeah.
Let me put it this way: if two things happen, I'm not voting for Laurie Hennis. If they don't win the national title, I'm
Yep.
not voting for Laurie Hennis. If NC State wins the national title, but they do it with zero of the obstacles that they faced this year,
Yep.
I don't know if I'm like, okay, well, yeah, you should have won the national title. That's what you should have
Agreed.
done. I have no idea how they won that national title. I have
Mhm.
no idea how they got through this season. It's, I,
That's
I
fine.
mean, I think she should begin to be put in some legitimate
Rarefied air.
conversations among the all-time hierarchy of like, where does she belong? And I truly believe that. I don't know. I'd have to go back and really do my history. Like, I'm not just going to sit here and be like, she's the best. She's the best. But like, I would have to sit down and really look at what that means. And so I'd probably lean her, but I think you could make the argument for a couple teams like Sean Carlson of Tennessee, Cal Kepler of Utah, Nick Polk of Lipscomb, maybe Pete Watson of Boston College. There's a lot of teams here where I go, mm, maybe.
This is a loaded group of nominees.
Yeah.
Like, consolidating it down to 9 was so hard, and consolidating it down to 1 vote is going to be impossible. I tend to agree with you on Hennis, but you look at, like you said, Carlson, this team for the women's team to be this good and this far ahead of schedule, I mean, I think this is kind of the performances we were expecting out of the men. And we just weren't expecting the Lady Vols to be this good this early. Great job from him. Obviously, I touched on what Florida, I thought they were very good. Mike Smith, like with the team that he put together at NAU this year, I think is inarguably was the best team all year, like from start to finish. And that's such a nice leap from what they were last year. And I really feel like he deserves a vote. Nick Stenoff, like lost so much. Like he
Yeah,
lost
they
to
did.
Mixima, he lost Askell. They were great this year. Like bring in
Lost
Lemongold.
Chalinga.
Well, trying yeah, and they were so good again this year. Like Nick Polk, like bringing Lipscomb to as the highest level they've ever been, and Pete Watson somehow getting Boston College to the national meet. I have no idea. Like I'm gonna have to think long and hard about this because I you could pick six of these coaches.
Yeah, I think I'm leading Hennis, but that's not like I'm not ready to type it in yet kind of
Yeah,
thing. Where it's like that's kind of leaning. And like here's the thing with Dave Smith, like you could argue that Dave Smith maybe gets into this conversation here. Because if you had told me you're like, hey, by the way, you're gonna lose Natalie Cook, you're not gonna have Gabby Hentman, and then maybe like
yeah.
one other from nothing, and maybe Stephanie Moss it is. You're not gonna have those women. Like, can you make the podium? I would have said, like, hey, no, I don't think they can. Don't think they can do that. And they did. And they were awesome. And they didn't race at all, but they showed up when it mattered. And I cannot believe this team is better than they were last year.
And within spitting distance of winning, like
Yeah.
which
Yeah.
is which was wild. So yeah, he certainly has a good case too. Let's go to most valuable runner on the men's side. First, we have Graham Blanks of Harvard. Second, we have Haftum Samuel Caleta of New Mexico. Kai Robinson of Stanford, Drew Bosley, NAU, Nico Young, NAU, Dennis Kipnikech, and Brian Massow of Oklahoma State, Parker Wolf of North Carolina, and then Patrick Kiprop from Arkansas. I mean, this one's pretty cut and dry.
Yeah.
Blanks just was the best throughout the year, and I mean, if you even want to talk about just his pure impact on the team, I mean, he was everything that Harvard needed to have them finish as high as they did throughout the whole year.
It was a really complete resume. It was one of the more complete cross country seasons we've seen from an individual, probably over the
Mhm.
past decade. I'd say
Yep.
it's one. It's not the best. It's not the most complete. It's not the most dominant season, but it's up there. It's in the it's in probably one of the better ones of the past decade. But yeah, this is not a conversation. I don't think we really need to have much more conversation there. And then the most valuable runner on the women's side, again, this is pretty straightforward. It's We have Parker Valby, Florida, Doris Lemengal, Alabama, Caitlin Tui, NC State, Hilda Olamamwe of Alabama, Bila Chepkiri of Oklahoma State, Olivia Markizich of Notre Dame, Chloe Scrimgeour of Georgetown, and Amina Matug of Duke, and Elise Stearns of Northern Arizona. You can argue the nuances like, well, this person should have been nominated, and what about this person
Mhm.
because they finished this at this national meet? It's like across the board, the entire season, these were the best women, and Volby's the best runner. Point blank, period. There's no conversation. I won't let you, Ben, or anyone else vote for anyone else. It's going to be Volby. Shocker. Sorry. Um, you
And she
can
led
try
her
to
team
offer.
to a podium finish this year. Like, this wasn't
No,
empty
she didn't.
calories.
No, she didn't.
Or no, 5th place finish, sorry. 5th
Yeah,
place
yeah, yeah.
finish. So, yeah, like, I mean, this was not an empty calorie, like, just racing
Right,
for herself either.
right. Yeah, I was going to say you're more than welcome to offer analysis on this, but
Yeah.
I don't know what you could really offer. So
Nope. Great year for Valby, and she will be a deserved winner. But that's all our awards. I mean, there's some like this one very cut and dry, but there's a lot of other ones we're going to be thinking long and hard about over the next day or so.
yeah, there's been some of these awards where I think this is the year where there's such a stark contrast where it's like either half of the awards is like, oh, no brainers, and then the other half is like, oh, and we might have a
Anybody's.
four-way tie. Yeah,
Yeah.
so gonna be really interested about that. But those are coming probably Tuesday or Wednesday. It will depend. We'll see what happens. But in the meantime, we've got a ton of all the end of season rankings, D1, D2, D3, team and individual rankings for cross country up on the site. High school team rankings are coming. I want to have them come Monday. We'll see what happens. Um, we've also got end of season awards, obviously, as D1, D2, D3, hopefully all that this week. And we got Boston U coverage. So that's coming up. I hope everyone enjoyed like the video coverage that we had, the photography that we had up there. Angela May will be back at Boston U for TSR this coming weekend. So we'll be there. We'll have a preview up for that. He's going to get out there, get some shots up for us, get some video interviews as well. His credentials cleared, so as long as he gets the flight, which I knock on wood, but he's been great for us. So we shout out to Andrew, and also shout out to Wyatt Barnsley, our beloved podcast editor who puts up with my nitty gritty details. I'm like, this needs to be here and this needs to be. He's been awesome. We love him. So thank you, Wyatt. You do a tremendous job. More importantly, just being patient with me. And that's all I've got.
All right. Well, Garrett, this was a fun podcast back, but until next week, I'll talk to you.
I'll talk to you.